Have you ever been publicly humiliated to the point where you just wished the earth would open up and swallow you whole? Today, I'm going to share the unbelievable true story of Sophia Williams, a 27-year-old art curator who thought she was heading out for a romantic dinner with a successful businessman. Instead, she was in for the most mortifying evening of her life, until a mysterious stranger at a nearby table decided to step in. When Luca Romano, a sophisticated 43-year-old Italian businessman, saw Sophia being publicly degraded by her arrogant date, his old-fashioned sense of honor was deeply offended. He made a subtle gesture to the waiter and uttered 4 words that would forever alter Sophia's life. "Bring her to me." What followed was a whirlwind of public humiliation, an unexpected rescue, a dangerous attraction, and a love story that proves that sometimes the most devastating evenings can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Sophia Williams gave her black dress one last adjustment as she walked through the elegant entrance of Rizzini, Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant. At 27, her work as a curator at the Morrison Gallery had allowed her to develop an appreciation for the finer things in life, even if her salary barely allowed her to indulge in them personally. Tonight felt different, though. Bradley Whitman, the investment banker she had met at a contemporary art exhibition the previous week, had insisted on taking her to Rizzini for what he called a proper New York dinner. Bradley was exactly the kind of man Sophia thought she should be dating. Successful, well-educated, financially stable, and genuinely interested in art and culture, or so she had believed. Sophia spotted Bradley at a corner table, already seated and staring at his phone, his fingers moving across the screen with the kind of aggressive jabs that suggested he was dealing with some kind of business frustration. He glanced up as she approached, his eyes immediately scanning her appearance in a way that felt more like an appraisal than a genuine expression of appreciation. "You're late," he stated flatly, without even bothering to stand up to greet her. Sophia glanced at her watch, confused. "I'm actually 3 minutes early. I've been here for 15 minutes. In my world, early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable." The tone was condescending, causing Sophia's stomach to clench with unease, but she forced a smile as she settled into her chair. "I'm sorry. Traffic was heavier than expected." Bradley didn't respond, instead signaling impatiently to a waiter. "We'll have the 2018 Barolo," he said, without consulting Sophia or even glancing at the wine list. "And we're ready to order. The lady will have the salmon, and I'll take the osso buco." Sophia stared at him, stunned. "Actually, I was hoping to look at the menu. The salmon here is excellent," Bradley interjected dismissively. "Trust me, I know what women like." The waiter, clearly picking up on the awkward dynamic, hesitated. "Perhaps the lady would like to see." "She's fine with the salmon." Bradley cut him off sharply. "And bring us some of those little appetizers, whatever you recommend." As the waiter retreated, Sophia felt her face flush with embarrassment and growing anger. "Bradley, I would have preferred to order for myself." "Sophia, sweetie," Bradley said, flashing the kind of patronizing smile that made her skin crawl. "You work at a small gallery in Soho. I eat at restaurants like this 3 times a week. I'm trying to save you from embarrassing yourself." The casual cruelty of the comment hit Sophia like a slap in the face. Embarrassing myself? Look, you're a beautiful woman, and I'm sure you know a lot about, art things, Bradley said, already turning his attention back to his phone. "But let's be realistic about our respective positions here." Sophia felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm a managing director at Goldman Sachs pulling down 8 figures a year, and you're a gallery assistant who probably makes less than my dry cleaning budget." The words were delivered with such casual cruelty that Sophia actually flinched. "I'm not a gallery assistant. I'm a curator." Bradley laughed, as if she had just told him a particularly amusing joke. "Curator of what? That little tourist trap in Soho?" "Sophia, honey, curating means selecting pieces for the Met or the Guggenheim. What you do is hang pictures in a storefront." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of humiliation and the rage that was beginning to boil in her chest. Around them, Other diners were beginning to notice the tone of their conversation, their voices carrying in the intimate atmosphere of the restaurant. "That's not true," she said quietly. "I have a master's degree in art history from Columbia, and I've organized exhibitions that 12 people came to see." Bradley's voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "Listen, I'm not trying to be mean here, but let's call things what they are. You're gorgeous, you clean up nice, and you can talk about paintings in a way that sounds intelligent. That's fine. That's what I need you for." The restaurant around them had grown quieter, other conversations fading as people became uncomfortable witnesses to Bradley's verbal assault. "What you need me for?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "Entertainment, arm candy, someone who can smile and nod when my clients want to talk about culture." Bradley leaned back in his chair, completely oblivious to the horrified expressions on the faces of the nearby diners. "Look, you're 27 and beautiful. This is your prime earning period. You can either waste it pretending to be some kind of intellectual, or you can be smart and find someone who can actually take care of you." Sophia stared at him, unable to comprehend that someone could be so casually cruel. "You're talking about me like I'm a prostitute. I'm talking about you like you're a realistic woman who understands how the world works," Bradley replied without a trace of shame. "You think your little art gallery is going to pay for a nice apartment, designer clothes, vacations to Europe? Please. But if you're smart about this, if you play your cards right, you could have a very comfortable life." The wine arrived, and Bradley made a show of tasting it while Sophia sat frozen in humiliation, the eyes of the other diners boring into her. She could feel their gaze, some looking away in discomfort, others watching with open disapproval of Bradley's behavior. "This is acceptable," Bradley told the sommelier dismissively, then turning back to Sophia. "Now, I have a client dinner next week at Le Bernardin. Important Japanese investors who appreciate beautiful, cultured women. You'll wear something elegant, but not too conservative. I'll send you some options." "Bradley, stop," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "I don't know what you think this is, but—" "What I think this is," Bradley interrupted, leaning forward with the predatory smile of someone who believed he held all the power, "is a mutually beneficial arrangement between two adults. You provide companionship and aesthetic enhancement, and I provide access to a lifestyle you could never afford on your gallery salary." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She had gone from being excited about a romantic dinner to being propositioned as if she were for sale, all while being systematically torn down and humiliated in front of a restaurant full of strangers. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Sophia said, reaching for what little dignity she had left. "I should go." "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic," Bradley said with annoying casualness. "Look, maybe I was too direct, but you're a smart woman. You had to have known what this was about." "What? What was this about?" "A man like me asking out a woman like you. Did you really think this was some kind of fairy tale romance?" Bradley's laugh was genuinely amused. "Sophia, you're beautiful enough to be seen with, intelligent enough to hold basic conversations, and young enough to be worth the investment. But let's not pretend we're equals here." The casual destruction of her self-worth, delivered with such matter-of-fact cruelty, left Sophia speechless. She could feel tears threatening, could feel the stares of the other diners burning into her, could feel her entire sense of self-worth crumbling under Bradley's assault. That's when she became aware that someone at a nearby table had been watching the entire exchange with growing fury. Luca Romano sat at a corner table with two business associates, but his attention had been completely captured by the scene unfolding 3 tables away. At 43, Luca had witnessed many things in his life that offended his sense of honor and decency, but watching a beautiful, intelligent woman being systematically degraded by a man who clearly saw her as a commodity had ignited a rage that he was struggling to contain. Luca had been raised by his Italian grandfather, a man who had instilled in him absolute rules about how women should be treated. You protected them, you honored them, and you never allowed anyone to humiliate them in your presence. The fact that this was happening in an Italian restaurant, surrounded by the culture and values Luca held sacred, made it even more insulting. "Chia quello?" Luca asked quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Bradley Whitman, replied Marco, one of his associates, who made it his business to know everyone of importance in Manhattan's financial district. Investment banker at Goldman Sachs. Has a reputation for being. Marco paused, choosing his words carefully. Difficult with women. Luca's jaw tightened as he watched Bradley lean forward, clearly continuing his verbal assault on the young woman, who looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. And the woman? I don't know her personally, but I've seen her at art galleries, museum events. She has good taste, carries herself well, educated. Luca nodded, his dark eyes never leaving the scene at Bradley's table. He watched as the woman Sophia, he had heard Bradley call her, tried to maintain her composure while being systematically destroyed by a man who clearly enjoyed having power over someone he perceived as vulnerable. It was intolerable. Excuse me, Luca said to his associates, standing with the fluid grace of a man who was accustomed to commanding attention. He approached the maitre d', a distinguished man named Giuseppe, who had worked at Rossini for 15 years and knew exactly who Luca Romano was and what his patronage meant to the restaurant. Giuseppe, Luca said quietly. The young woman at table 7, her dinner companion, is being inappropriate. Giuseppe's face immediately showed concern. He had been watching the situation develop with growing unease, but had been unsure how to intervene without creating a scene that might damage the restaurant's reputation. See, Mr. Romano, we have been concerned about the situation. Bring her to me, Luca said simply. Excuse the woman. Invite her to join my table. Tell her that her presence would be appreciated. Giuseppe understood immediately. In the subtle hierarchies of exclusive restaurants, there were ways to rescue a patron from an uncomfortable situation while allowing everyone to maintain their dignity. Of course, Mr. Romano. Sophia was staring at her untouched wine glass, trying to gather the strength to stand up and walk out with whatever shred of dignity she had left, when the maitre d' appeared beside her table. Scusi, signorina, Giuseppe said with old-world courtesy. But there is a gentleman who would be honored by your company at his table. He is a valued patron of our establishment, and he has noticed that your evening has been less pleasant than it should be. Sophia looked up, confused. I don't understand. Giuseppe gestured discreetly toward the corner table where Luca Romano sat watching the exchange with intense dark eyes. Even from a distance, Sophia could see that he was extraordinarily handsome, tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. The gentleman is a collector of fine art, Giuseppe continued. He believes you might have much to discuss. Bradley, who had gone back to staring at his phone, looked up with irritation. What's this about? Nothing that concerns you, signor, Giuseppe replied with cool professionalism. Like hell it doesn't concern me, Bradley snapped. This is my date, and we're having a private conversation. Giuseppe's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Perhaps the senior has forgotten that this is a place where all guests deserve to be treated with respect. The gentle rebuke, delivered with perfect Italian politeness, made Bradley's face flush red with anger. Are you kidding me? I'm a regular customer here. I spend more in a month than you do in a year. The voice came from directly behind Bradley, and when he turned, he found himself looking up at Luca Romano. Up close, Luca was even more imposing than he had appeared from across the restaurant. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair showing just a touch of silver, olive skin, and the kind of bone structure that suggested Mediterranean aristocracy. His suit was clearly custom-made, fitting his athletic frame perfectly, and everything about him radiated wealth, power, and barely controlled danger. But it was his eyes that made Bradley instinctively lean back in his chair. They were dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that suggested he had seen and done things that most people only read about in newspapers. I'm sorry, Bradley said, though his voice carried more confusion than apology. Do we know each other? We do now, Luca replied, his slight Italian accent making even simple words sound elegant. I am Luca Romano, and I have been watching you humiliate this beautiful woman for the past 20 minutes. Bradley's face went through several expressions: confusion, recognition of the name, and then a kind of calculated defiance that suggested he was weighing Luca's importance against his own ego. "This is a private dinner," Bradley said finally. "I don't know who you think you are, but I know exactly who I am," Luca interrupted, his voice remaining conversational despite the steel underneath. "The question is whether you know who you are, because from where I sit, you appear to be a small man who gets pleasure from making beautiful women feel worthless." The insult was delivered with such casual elegance that it took Bradley a moment to process it. When he did, his face flushed with anger. "Now look here." "No, you look here," Luca said, and suddenly his voice carried an authority that made everyone at nearby tables go quiet. "This is an Italian establishment that operates according to Italian principles of respect and honor. What you are doing to this woman is a disgrace to both." Sophia stared up at Luca, transfixed not just by his defense of her, but by the way he carried himself, with the absolute confidence of someone who had never doubted his right to intervene in situations that offended his sense of justice. "Sophia," Luca said, turning to her with a smile that transformed his entire face from intimidating to warmly inviting. "Would you honor me by joining me for dinner? I promise you will be treated with the respect you deserve." The way he said her name with perfect pronunciation and genuine warmth made something flutter in Sophia's chest. She looked at Bradley, who was clearly struggling between outrage and some kind of recognition that he might be dealing with someone more powerful than himself. "She's with me," Bradley said, but his voice lacked the aggressive confidence he had been showing all evening. "She was with you," Luca corrected. "Now she's being invited to join someone who understands how a woman should be treated." Sophia felt something shift inside her, a combination of gratitude, attraction, and the sudden realization that she didn't have to sit there and accept Bradley's abuse. She stood up, her legs slightly unsteady, but her voice clear. "Thank you," she said to Luca. "I would be honored to join you." Bradley's face went through several shades of red as he realized what was happening. "Sophia, sit down. Don't make a scene. The only person making a scene here is you," Luca said calmly. "And now you're going to pay for the wine you ordered, leave this establishment, and never again set foot in any restaurant that I frequent. You can't tell me where I can and can't eat." Bradley sputtered, but there was something in his voice that suggested he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Luca smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Would you like to test that theory?" Something in Luca's tone, quiet, confident, and carrying the weight of unspoken consequences, made Bradley's protest die in his throat. He looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware that every other diner was watching the exchange with obvious approval for Luca and clear distaste for his own behavior. "This is ridiculous," Bradley muttered, throwing some bills on the table. "Keep her. You deserve each other." As Bradley stormed out of the restaurant, Sophia became aware that her hands were shaking, a combination of relief and residual humiliation. Luca noticed immediately. "Giuseppe," he said quietly, "please ensure that the ladies' meal is cancelled and credited appropriately. We will be dining at my table." As they walked across the restaurant to Luca's corner table, Sophia could feel every eye in the place following them. But instead of the pitying stares she had endured during Bradley's assault, these looks seemed to carry approval and admiration. Luca's table was clearly the best in the restaurant, positioned to offer both privacy and excellent views of the room, set with crystal and silver that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. His two associates stood as they approached, both men nodding respectfully to Sophia before discreetly moving to another table to give Luca and Sophia some privacy. "Please," Luca said, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "Make yourself comfortable." As Sophia settled into her seat, she became aware of several things simultaneously. Luca smelled incredible, something expensive and masculine that made her want to lean closer. The way he moved suggested both strength and control, and when he looked at her, she felt like she was the only person in the room. "I don't know how to thank you," Sophia said once they were seated. "What you did back there. What I did was what any decent man should do when he sees a woman being treated with disrespect," Luca replied, pouring her a glass of wine from a bottle that was clearly much more expensive than what Bradley had ordered. "The question is how a beautiful, intelligent woman ends up having dinner with someone like that in the first place? Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. I met him at an art exhibition last week. He seemed different then, interested in culture, respectful, successful. I thought I was meeting someone who shared my interests, and instead you discovered that he saw you as a commodity to be purchased. The way Lucas said it, with genuine anger on her behalf, made Sophia feel validated in a way she desperately needed. I feel so stupid, she said quietly. I should have seen what he was really like. No, Lucas said firmly, leaning forward slightly. Men like that are skilled at presenting themselves as something they're not. They prey on women who are too kind, too trusting, too willing to see the best in people. There is no shame in falling victim to a predator, Sophia. The shame belongs entirely to him. The way he said her name, with that slight Italian inflection, sent warmth spreading through her chest. But more than his accent, it was the respect in his voice, the way he spoke to her as if she was someone worth defending, worth protecting, worth honoring. Tell me about yourself, Luca continued, settling back in his chair with the relaxed attention of someone who genuinely wanted to know everything about her. Giuseppe mentioned that you work in the art world. I'm a curator at the Morrison Gallery in Soho, Sophia said, then immediately felt self-conscious about how modest that sounded compared to Bradley's dismissive description. Morrison Gallery, Luca repeated thoughtfully. Contemporary American artists, correct? You had an exhibition last month featuring urban landscape painters. Sophia stared at him in surprise. You know our gallery? I know good art when I see it, and I know that Morrison Gallery has one of the best eyes for emerging talent in the city. Luca smiled, and the expression transformed his face from intimidating to devastatingly attractive. Which tells me that their curator has exceptional taste and expertise. The validation hit Sophia like a warm wave. After spending an hour being told that her work was meaningless, hearing genuine respect and knowledge from someone who clearly understood the art world made her feel like she could breathe again. You're a collector? She asked. Among other things. My family has been acquiring art for generations, and I've continued the tradition. I'm particularly interested in Italian Renaissance pieces, but I appreciate quality in all periods. As if summoned by some invisible signal, Giuseppe appeared with menus and the kind of deferential attention that suggested Luca was an extremely important customer. What would you recommend tonight? Luca asked, including Sophia in the question in a way that made it clear her preferences mattered. The chef has prepared a special menu this evening, Giuseppe replied. Perhaps you would allow us to surprise you? Luca looked at Sophia. Does that appeal to you? Giuseppe has excellent taste, and the kitchen here is extraordinary. The contrast with Bradley's behavior couldn't have been more stark. Where Bradley had ordered for her without even asking her opinion, Luca was soliciting her preferences and making it clear that her desires would guide their meal. That sounds wonderful, Sophia said. As Giuseppe departed, Luca poured more wine and settled back in his chair with the kind of relaxed attention that made Sophia feel like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. So, tell me about your work, he said. What drew you to art curation? Sophia found herself opening up in a way she rarely did with people she had just met. There was something about Luca's focused attention, the way he listened not just to her words, but to the passion behind them, that made her feel safe sharing her dreams and ambitions. I've always been drawn to the way art can tell stories that words can't capture, she explained. A good exhibition doesn't just display beautiful objects. It creates a narrative that helps people see the world differently. And what story are you trying to tell with your current exhibition? The fact that he assumed she had a current exhibition, that he took her work seriously enough to imagine her actively creating rather than just maintaining, sent warmth flooding through Sophia's chest. We're featuring 5 emerging artists who are using traditional techniques to explore contemporary themes of identity and belonging. The idea is to show how classical training can be used to express very modern experiences. Luca's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That sounds fascinating. The tension between traditional technique and contemporary subject matter can create a powerful resonance. The conversation was unlike anything Sophia had experienced with Bradley, or really with most men she had dated. Luca didn't just listen politely while waiting for his turn to talk. He engaged with her ideas, asked thoughtful questions, and demonstrated a level of knowledge about art history and theory that matched her own graduate-level education. Their food began arriving, a parade of small plates that showcased the kitchen's skill and Giuseppe's understanding of their tastes. Everything was perfectly prepared and beautifully presented, but Sophia barely noticed because she was so caught up in the conversation. "You mentioned that your family collects art. That risotto was possibly the best I've ever had," she admitted, savoring the lingering taste. "Do you ever show your collection publicly?" Luca's lips curved into a smile. "We maintain a private collection, which we occasionally loan out to museums for special exhibitions. Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing it sometime?" The invitation, so casually delivered yet laced with unmistakable intent, sent a little thrill through Sophia. "I would love that." "Good," Luca replied, his eyes twinkling. "I think you'd find it educational." The way he emphasized educational, adding that subtle, suggestive undertone, made Sophia intensely aware of him, not just as a rescuer or art collector, but as a man. He was undeniably handsome, radiating wealth and power, possessing a sophisticated charm that made her feel both safe and utterly desired. "Could I ask you something?" Sophia ventured, emboldened by the wine and his obvious interest. "Anything. Why did you intervene tonight? Most people would have simply watched, minding their own business." Luca paused, considering his response. "I was raised with certain principles about how women should be treated. Watching someone humiliate a beautiful, intelligent woman in public." He shrugged, a gesture of distaste. "It was intolerable. But you didn't even know me. I knew enough. I could see you were struggling to maintain your dignity while someone systematically chipped away at it. I could see you were educated, cultured, deserving of a respect you weren't receiving." Luca's gaze locked with hers across the table. Sometimes you don't need someone's entire history to recognize their worth. The intensity in his voice when he said, "recognize their worth," resonated deeply within Sophia, making her feel as though he saw something in her she had forgotten existed, something valuable and beautiful that Bradley's cruel behavior had temporarily masked. "Well, thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. You would have found your strength and left on your own." Luca stated with unwavering certainty. "You were already preparing to do exactly that when I intervened. I simply accelerated the process." As the evening unfolded, Sophia found herself drawn to Luca with an intensity she had never experienced before. It wasn't just his obvious wealth and influence, although those were undeniably appealing. It was his intelligence, his genuine curiosity about her thoughts and dreams, his blend of old-world charm and modern sophistication. But above all, it was the way he looked at her, as though she were someone deserving of protection, admiration, and desire all at once. "I should probably get going," Sophia said reluctantly as they finished their espresso, and Giuseppe approached with the check. "This has been wonderful, but I don't want to monopolize your entire evening." "You haven't monopolized anything," Luca assured her, signing the check without even glancing at the amount. "You've made it memorable." As they rose to leave, Luca placed his hand on the small of Sophia's back, a gesture that was both protective and undeniably intimate. The contact sent a wave of heat through her, and she had to consciously resist the urge to lean into his touch. "Allow me to drive you home," Luca offered as they reached the restaurant's entrance. "That's not necessary. I can easily get a taxi." "Sophia," Luca interrupted gently, his voice laced with a persuasive warmth. "It would be my pleasure to ensure you get home safely." The way he emphasized "my pleasure," with an undertone suggesting he genuinely wanted to spend more time with her, rather than simply observing social niceties, made Sophia's decision incredibly easy. "Thank you. I'd like that." Luca's car was precisely what Sophia would have imagined. A sleek, black sedan that probably cost more than she earned in 3 years, boasting a luxurious leather interior and the kind of understated elegance that whispered, rather than shouted, about wealth. As they drove through Manhattan toward her apartment on the Upper West Side, Sophia found herself stealing glances at Luca's striking profile. Even in the dim light of the car's interior, he was devastatingly handsome, strong jawline, aristocratic nose, and those intense, dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Tell me more about your family's collection," Sophia said, partly to fill the comfortable silence and partly because she was genuinely intrigued. "We have pieces spanning several centuries," Luca replied, navigating the city traffic with effortless skill. "My great-grandfather began the collection when he immigrated to America from Italy. He believed that surrounding yourself with beautiful things elevated the soul. That's a beautiful philosophy. He was a remarkable man. He built something from nothing, and he never forgot that success comes with a responsibility to family, to community, and to preserving the beautiful things in the world." The way Luca spoke about his great-grandfather with such obvious love and respect gave Sophia a valuable insight into his character. This was a man who clearly valued family, tradition, and a strong sense of responsibility. "What kind of business is your family in?" Sophia asked, then immediately wondered if that was too personal a question so early on. "Various enterprises," Luca replied easily. "Real estate, restaurants, import and export. We've been in New York for 4 generations now, so our interests have naturally evolved over time." The answer, while somewhat vague, hinted at a much larger story, but it was delivered with such natural confidence that Sophia didn't feel as though she was being deliberately evaded. When they arrived at her building, a modest but well-maintained brownstone that housed 6 apartments, Luca got out of the car to walk her to the door. Another display of old-fashioned courtesy that made Sophia's heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she said as they stood in front of the building's entrance. "For dinner, for rescuing me, for treating me like a human being worthy of respect. Thank you for allowing me the pleasure of your company," Luca replied, moving closer. "This evening has been far more enjoyable than I anticipated when I arrived at Rini's tonight." They were standing incredibly close now, close enough that Sophia could detect the subtle fragrance of his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the radiant warmth emanating from his body. The attraction that had been steadily building all evening suddenly felt electric, charged with possibility and undeniable desire. "Sophia," Luca said softly, reaching out to gently brush a stray strand of hair away from her face. His touch, feather-light yet electrifying, sent shivers down her spine. As his thumb traced along her cheekbone, Sophia couldn't suppress a small gasp of response. "You are extraordinary," he whispered, his faint accent making the words sound almost poetic. Sophia felt herself instinctively leaning into his touch, drawn by an attraction that was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. She knew she should be cautious, should maintain a safe distance with a man she barely knew, should certainly not be falling for someone whose world she didn't fully understand. But as Luca cupped her face in both hands and looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever laid eyes on, caution seemed utterly irrelevant. "I would very much like to see you again," Luca said, his voice now roughened with undisguised desire. "I would like that too," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, they stood there gazing into each other's eyes, balanced precariously on the edge of something that had the potential to change everything. Sophia could feel herself trembling with a potent mix of longing and nervousness, and she could see her own desire mirrored in the depths of Luca's eyes. Then Luca leaned down and pressed the softest, most tender kiss to her forehead, a gesture that was somehow more intimate and profoundly moving than anything more passionate would have been. "Ponote bella Sophia," he whispered against her skin. "Sleep well." After he left, Sophia stood alone in her apartment, still feeling the lingering warmth of his hands on her face, still savoring the tantalizing possibility of what might develop between them. She had gone out that evening expecting a pleasant dinner and had instead experienced the most humiliating ordeal of her life, followed by the most romantic rescue she could possibly have imagined. The next morning, a delivery arrived at the Morrison Gallery, a breathtaking arrangement of pristine white roses and fragrant Italian lilies, accompanied by a note penned in elegant script. "Thank you for a perfect evening. I hope you will allow me to show you my collection soon." Sophia spent the entire day in a daze, replaying every single moment of the previous evening, Bradley's brutal assault on her dignity, Luca's decisive intervention, and the way he had looked at her across the dinner table, as if she were something precious and deserving of his unwavering protection. That afternoon, her phone rang. "Sophia, this is Luca Romano." The mere sound of his voice sent a surge of warmth flooding through her chest. "Hello, Luca. Thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful." "Not as beautiful as the woman they were sent to," Luca replied. The compliment, delivered with such effortless charm, didn't sound at all like a practiced line. "I was wondering if you might be free this evening? I would very much like to show you that art collection I mentioned." Sophia's pulse quickened. "I would love that. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. That evening, instead of taking her to a museum or gallery, Luca drove Sophia to a magnificent townhouse on the Upper East Side, a meticulously restored 19th-century mansion that radiated old-world elegance and undeniable grandeur. "This is your home?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with awe as they approached the impressive front steps. "One of them. This is where I keep the collection." The interior of the townhouse was simply breathtaking, a seamless blend of classical architecture and modern comfort, filled with an astounding collection of artwork that took Sophia's breath away. But even more than the individual pieces themselves, it was the way the collection had been curated that truly impressed her. Each room told a story, creating a cohesive and captivating narrative that flowed effortlessly from one piece to the next. "This is incredible," Sophia breathed, pausing in front of a stunning Renaissance painting that she immediately recognized from her art history textbooks. "Is that really a Caravaggio?" "One of his lesser-known works, but yes." Luca moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the comforting warmth of his body. "My great-grandfather acquired it from a family in Rome who needed to sell quickly." As they moved through the house, Luca shared the captivating stories behind various pieces, detailing how they had been acquired, what they meant to his family, and how they fit into the broader narrative of Italian-American immigration and success. Sophia was increasingly aware that she was being given a private tour, an exclusive experience that very few people had ever been granted. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked as they paused in front of an exceptional collection of contemporary Italian artists. "Because you understand what you're looking at," Luca replied simply. "Because you can see not just the individual pieces, but how they work together to tell a larger story. And because..." Luca turned to face her fully, his dark eyes locking with hers, holding that same intense gaze she remembered from the restaurant. "And because I find myself wanting to share beautiful things with you." The way he said beautiful things, with a subtle implication that she herself was among them, made Sophia's breath catch in her throat. "Luca, I know this is moving quickly," he said, stepping closer, closing the distance between them. "I know you have every reason to be cautious about getting involved with someone you've just met. But Sophia, what I feel for you is not something I can ignore." "What do you feel for me?" Instead of answering with mere words, Luca cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing gentle, mesmerizing patterns on her skin that sent a jolt of electricity through her entire body. "I feel like you're someone I've been waiting for without even knowing I was waiting," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I feel like protecting you, cherishing you, showing you how a woman like you deserves to be treated." The sheer intensity in his voice should have felt overwhelming, but instead, it made Sophia feel profoundly desired in a way she had never experienced before. "A woman like me, beautiful, intelligent, talented, deserving of respect and admiration and love." When Luca kissed her, it was with a passion that had been steadily building since the moment he had witnessed her being humiliated at Rini's. His lips were warm and firm, his hands tangled in her hair, and Sophia felt as though she had finally found exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Sophia stood proudly in the main gallery of the Romano Foundation's brand-new art museum, watching as visitors moved through the exhibition she had meticulously curated, a groundbreaking show that traced the profound influence of Italian Renaissance techniques on contemporary American artists. The museum was Luca's latest passion project, a stunning space designed to showcase both his family's extensive collection and a series of rotating exhibitions that brought world-class art to New York's vibrant and discerning art-loving community. But it was far more than just a vanity project. It was a genuine and significant contribution to the city's cultural landscape, and Sophia had been granted complete creative control over its entire programming. "Admiring your work?" Luca asked, approaching her from behind and wrapping his arms possessively around her waist. "Our work," Sophia gently corrected, leaning back against his chest and savoring his nearness. "I never could have created something like this without your unwavering support and resources. You could have created it anywhere with anyone," Luca replied, tenderly pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You just needed someone who recognized your extraordinary talent and gave you the freedom to fully express it." Sophia turned in his arms, gazing up at the man who had rescued her from the worst evening of her life and transformed it into the beginning of the most fulfilling and passionate relationship she could ever have imagined. "Any regrets about intervening with a stranger's terrible date?" she asked, repeating a question that had become something of a running joke between them. Luca's smile was both possessive and filled with an all-consuming love. "Only that I didn't intervene sooner." And that's the story of Sophia Williams, the talented art curator who was publicly humiliated by her date until a mysterious and captivating Italian businessman at a nearby table decided that no woman should ever be treated with such disrespect. When Luca Romano quietly ordered, "Bring her to me," he wasn't just rescuing Sophia from an awful evening. He was setting in motion a remarkable love story that proved that sometimes the worst nights of our lives can unexpectedly become the doorways to our greatest happiness. Sophia and Luca's story serves as a powerful reminder that true strength lies in protecting others, that genuine power is used to uplift people rather than tear them down, and that sometimes the most significant interventions come from complete strangers who simply cannot stand to witness injustice unfolding before their eyes. If this incredible story resonated with you and you want to hear more amazing tales of unexpected rescues, dangerous attractions, and love that conquers all obstacles, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the most meaningful and transformative relationships begin with the most humiliating moments. What did you think of Sophia and Luca's story? Have you ever been rescued by a stranger? Would you have accepted Luca's invitation to his table? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected kindness, romantic rescues, and finding love in the most unlikely and unexpected circumstances. Remember, sometimes when someone shows you who they really are in the worst possible way, it ultimately creates space for someone else to show you who you truly deserve to be with in the best possible way. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.